This is a Two Front podcast.
You got a crooked smile, well that don't bother me much. You double over, working double time, you double tough. I'll just shine it up until the sun hit like a glare. I gotta dare, get the fuck up out the chair.
Happy dentist, let me tell you about my good friend, Jonathan Levine. I first met him back in 2018 when I moved to New York City after finishing my ortho residency. Fast forward 7 years, he's built this remarkable practice, created multiple successful companies like Glow Science and Glow Good Foundation, and he still finds time to write books like his newest one, Oral. But what really sets Jonathan apart is his approach to teamwork and culture. Anyone who's visited his practice knows exactly what I mean. The moment you walk in, everyone from the assistants to the lab techs are smiling, collaborating, and focused on creating this incredible patient experience. Welcome to The Happy Dentist. I'm Dr. Ingrid Mira, and I can't wait for you to hear from my friend, Dr. Jonathan Levine.
Thank you, Ingrid. Pleasure to be here. Excited to be here with you, for sure. Thank you.
So you have so many people that have ideas, right? But so many people, especially dentists, because we tend to be perfectionists, are waiting for the idea to be perfect, for the logo to be perfect, to have that perfect website, to make sure we have all the sign up, everything right. And then they never do anything. Like, I remember when someone told me with any type of startup, especially like a tech startup, you're driving the car at 90 miles an hour as you're building the car. And sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I think so many people just wait until everything is perfect. And I was definitely one of them.
95% of the time it doesn't work, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And Jonathan is a doer. And the older I get, the more I love the doers more than the ones that have amazing ideas. And Jonathan, you know, as a doer, what do you think are the main characteristics for people to become more a doer and make ideas become reality?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first I got to quote my good friend, Dr. Frank Salenza, who you know, and he likes to say perfection means it never is going to happen because it doesn't exist, you know. And Eric Ries, who wrote tremendous books on this concept of agile innovation and MVP, minimal viable products or service, is a whole concept of build, test, learn. It's a building, a testing, and a learning loop. And it came out of software, the software industry in Silicon Valley. And I'm a big believer in that. When you have an idea, what you really have to figure out is one thing, is who. Who is going to help you take that idea and start? And Christian, I remember the conversation we had. We said something like, let's use the office. Let's go test this idea about these digital tools. And I was having this argument with you about the analog ceramist, who has been with me 20 plus years, and a digital ceramist. And we had this conversation of, can the digital ceramist do as well as the analog? And using the new digital tools, how does it compare to baseline? And we said, Christian said, let's do it. We were having a drink or a coffee. And that was the attitude. And that's the attitude, I think, for winners. They say, let's go after it. It's one thing to talk about it. You got to, kind of build an idea. But then you got to test your idea, everything you just said, Kyle. And then you got to learn from that idea. That's going to iterate. That iteration is going to go into that next round of innovation. Whatever it is, whether it's a learning institute, a teaching institute, a product business, a service business.
Yeah. Jonathan, for those listeners who want to start an idea, I'm curious, do you think that someone can cultivate that ability to be a doer and get out of that headspace, or do you think you're born that way?
Wow. I tell you, my journey was as a young athlete and playing a college lacrosse with an amazing coach. You got to put it on the field. In athletics or anything with performance, whether it was music or theater or athletics or sports, of course, you put it out there. You have to prepare. You're putting yourself out there and you're taking action, And because of that mindset, the conversation doesn't last very long because you gotta prepare and you gotta go. And I came from there. Through college and playing a college sport and having a fantastic coach and teammates and realizing what's most important to create great wins, to be at the highest level possible. And my big favorite line is, life is a team sport, and so is dentistry, or so is the industry that you're in. And so it's who we surround ourselves with, but to really have that mindset, that adopted mindset that you have to take action, you have to go after it. I do think the short answer is, I do think absolutely it can be learned, but you experience the joy in that. You experience the joy of the pain that it takes to get to a certain place, to prepare yourself and to get out there and to do it.
Now, you mentioned something very important. I think it's one of the first steps that, and I'm meeting more and more great entrepreneurs, great business people, people that are doing a lot, that have been doing a lot and starting things from scratch and so on. And they all have this characteristic of grabbing an idea. If they had the idea, or they learned from somebody, or if it's an existing idea, they look at the potential and they immediately start thinking about who are the people that can help them immediately, right? And they know that they cannot do alone, and they have this great skill of connecting with people and making their dream become the dream of the other, right? Onboarding people and making the other feel like this is also mine, right? And what do you think you did right, and to identify these people and identify the characteristics that certain projects needed?
And before Jonathan answers, I would like to add that I also would like to know, what did you have to know about yourself? Because I know with my own journey was I had to learn what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. There were things I thought I was good at that I didn't realize I wasn't good at until I failed at them. So that I would also like to add that into the question.
Yeah, and that is a great question to precede Christians, because we all have our strengths. It's only through failure do we really see what are we strong at, but what we're not strong at. Now, you could be taking the Colby test, you can take these personality tests. They're very helpful because they really help you. Enneagrams, they help you focus on what you're best at. So that's helpful. And people should take those types of tests as early as possible. But through your experience, you really learn what you're good at. I'm much more on the creative side, and I need an integrator, operational person to make my ideas really work, because it all becomes execution. I'm a big fan of a guy named Dan Sullivan, strategic coach. He's been coaching CEOs and business people for 40 years. He has a book called Who, Not How. I got an idea, and everybody says, how am I going to do this? It's not how you're going to do this. It's who you're going to find, who's going to help you do it, because I know my strengths. Christian's a creative. I know that man. And he's a super creative. And he needs these people who, like me, who's going to really help him operationalize the ideas as a team. And I'm the exact same way, but I didn't know that in the beginning, right, Kyle, to your point. And it took time.
And is there any nuance doing it in a dental practice? Because you have a fairly large dental practice. You have 27 people, right? You have multi-specialty. Is there any difference in doing it for a dental practice than doing it in a startup, for example?
I think all businesses really have a very connected dots when it comes to that question. And that is that if we're practicing dentistry, we have to know our role of responsibility. I evolved to kind of a player coach. I coach the team. We have interdisciplinary calls. We do treatment planning together. And the beauty of a multi-specialty, as we know, allows us that collaborative point of view, which is fantastic. But for me to be able to have a successful business, both on the clinical side and on the hospitality of how we treat our patients and have a growing enterprise, I need operational excellence. And to have operational excellence, I need a team leader who's going to help me drive that operational excellence, right? Standards, protocols, SOPs, systems, training. So, as early as possible, the young dentist, let's talk about the young dentist that's starting a dental practice, for them to leapfrog over many of the pitfalls that will happen in any business in the early days. You got to get ahead of the curve. And so I think we need to surround ourselves with experts great lawyer, great accountant, good banking person to help us on that. And then we have to find kind of that executional person, the person who helps us integrate our ideas, build our systems. And that could be the classic office manager, but it's really just a really strong operational person who's extremely detailed, who really can drive systems and also can help you lead. Because at the end of the day, right, we're inspiring people to be the best they can be. And so you need that both on the creative doc side and you need that on the operational side.
And how do you identify a good operational person?
And to add to that, Jonathan, and I learned this over the past couple years, everything that you're saying about Enneagram, DISC, entrepreneurial operating system, and really kind of having these frameworks. I love frameworks for identifying, how to win. And I'm super curious to piggyback on Christian's question, this operational arm, because I do think that most entrepreneurs are like creators, innovators, probably Enneagram type 7. I'm curious what your Enneagram is. But how do you find your operator from a framework standpoint, whether it's DISC, Enneagram, or any of these other frameworks that you like?
Yeah. Oh boy, that's the $10 billion question. I think it takes, number one, in Yiddish we'll say mazel, in English we'll say luck. But look, the more we know, the better chance that the person we put on our hip, and for the creative, it's the integrator, that Jobs, he called it the dynamic duo with Tim Case. You need that operationally excellent person. So you're meeting people, you can go down a long list of where do I get these candidates? Who does my inner circle know? How do I get that word out that I'm looking for that person? But at the end of the day, I look at a few things, right? We look at a shared value system. The most important thing that there's alignment. I started 3 companies. I've made so many mistakes in these 3 companies. That's why I know a little bit just from the pain of it. But the truth is that you start a company, there's so many things to know. The person, let's just talk about the person that you want to allow have an investment in your company. Well, if you don't have a shared vision and shared core values, there's going to be a problem down the road. And we all know this. So your value system, your shared value, and your alignment on the vision, the purpose, and that value system is critical. So when you think you're doing diligence, do more diligence. You really got to get to know each other. And you start. Sometimes it's just a good way, just start without contracts, without anything. Just get to really know each other because it is very hard. And that's the whole people side of the equation of everything we do is to get to know each other in a way that you believe you've made the right decision because it's an important one.
I think the role we're talking about that most dental practices are missing is the COO, right? And in most startups, we have this person and they're great because you usually have this like visionary founder or many founders and they have this idea and they may have some contacts. But then you have the person that kind of brings them down to earth and says, yeah, that sounds great, but how are we going to get that to 50 different states? Or how are we going to expand that to the other country? Or how are we going to get this from 1 million?
I love the guys that are like trying to find a reason not to do it. I actually incorporated this myself. Every time I come with an idea, I sit with the very pragmatic people in my team and I say, try to convince me not to do this. We need to find a reason not to do this. Because if we're going to fail fast. And usually the smartest operators are the ones that will ask the best questions and will play the devil's advocate at the highest level. And as they're asking the questions, until the point that you're like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't do it. And then that pragmatic person turns to you and say, you know what? Even though we have no guarantee, I think we should.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Jonathan, yeah. For our listeners, for anyone who hasn't heard of the Enneagram or the DISC, do you have any thoughts on what profile your operator should be using these frameworks?
Yeah, your operator, they love the devil's in the detail. They're very much incredibly organized. They are detailed. They love numbers. They love metrics. They love that whole kind of science behind business. So they become great students, and then, practically speaking, doing it from a standpoint of building your goal of operational excellence.
They're not impulsive, neither anxious, because I'm very impulsive and anxious.
That's yeah. That's right. There's a consistency in behavior, and it's just what Christian was talking about. These people have to. I have a good friend, Brian Marcel, Alvarez and Marcel, such a blessing to have a friend like this. Largest turnout for in globally, and Brian will say the person has to deliver the bad news along with the good news. Right? They're the practical, pragmatic one, and they're keeping us on course because the creatives, we got 100 ideas a minute. And you got to focus maniacally. You got to focus like a maniac on your business. And we've learned that because we learned that through the pain of trying to do too many things and, losing your focus. And we all know
I
that.
feel like we need a group of these. I want like a Facebook group of or like a WhatsApp group of all of these operators, and then we can just like meeting of the minds, like everyone just like start their companies because we need each other.
Well, that's why there's business groups, there's CEO groups, there's CFO groups, because you cross-pollinate with each other. If I had a young operator, I would love my more experienced operators to have conversations with that person. I used to be involved with a group called the executive committee group, but as groups of business owners, because there's so much consistency in the issues and the problems that face all businesses, all industries, and you can really learn from each other.
And now bringing all these topics into Glow, into your first company outside, outside the practice, give us a little bit of context on in what stage of your career you were when you started, what crazy idea you had, the courage to build something, a bleaching system that was not like a blue ocean, but was something that already existed, why you thought yours could be different. You had an aha moment or you met people who helped you make it happen.
So when I started Glow, I already, in 2001, started a company called Ghost Smile. And it was also based on a little innovative whitening pen, a whitening ampule. The big idea I have to really give to Stacy Levine, my much better half, and she had the idea of where do you distribute this? And the innovation was, let's take oral care out of the drugstore and let's go put it into prestige beauty. And so there was Stace, who can sell ice to the Eskimos, and as I like to say, and we were in Sephora, Saks, Nordstrom, before anybody, of course, in dentistry. And that's when there were some dermatologists just starting to get into prestige beauty. I could tell you a lot of stories about it, but we built a company. I had a pretty rough experience with the private equity person that I got involved with. And we ended up selling the company to him early. We did it fine, but we didn't think what we could have really done. And then about a couple of years later, I had an innovative idea beyond the ampule for whitening. And I tested it, Christian, to answer your question, in the clinic, where we took the best of tray and gels and the best of kind of the Zoom whitening lights that stood outside the mouth, built it into a mouthpiece, flexible circuit, and knowing that the warming heat is what creates the breakdown of the compound, produces more of the whitening oxygens, and closes the system because it's in a mouthpiece. Tested in the office, got the same efficacy in 1/4 the time, no sensitivity because we controlled the temperature of the heat, but still got the breakdown of the compound, the hydrogen peroxide, and away we went. So then learning from the past is, what channel were we putting it in? And, are we going to go into professional? Are we going to go into the consumer? So before you do all of that, you got to say, okay, who am I going to get and who's going to help me run the company? And so with Glow, I didn't go the route of private equity, and I put a lot of my own money in it, and more of the friends and family. And I learned so much through the both experiences, because you end up, if you're not surrounded by great experts, and if you do make some operational mistake on hires, it takes much longer to get there. So the greatest thing I could say is to learn from these types of experiences. And what gets us kind of here is the experiences from the past, because we do learn from them. The partners we bring in, the operational people we bring in, the decisions and strategies we come up with. So for me, it's the journey. I always talk about it. It's really the journey, and I have a mindset where when you hit the face wins, the headwinds, it's not the problems we face, but it's how we face our problems, right? How we look at it as challenges, and really to always surround ourselves with optimistic people. It's not that I don't like pessimistic people. I want to hear the bad news, but I like people to say we're going after it, we're on it, we understand what we're doing. But it's also to have mentors that could say to you, stay maniacally focused. Don't try to do too much at the same time. You want to build a beautiful skyscraper, build the foundation first. Thank you, Howard Schultz. Blessed to have him as a friend. And these people that you bring into your lives that you get to meet, you can learn so much from them. And you want to learn these things as early as possible in your life. And then, even though somebody told you something, you didn't do it that way, and then all of a sudden you see it, and then you do switch gears. But I think if we all think about our careers, it's those learning points, those touch points along the way that really help us shape what we do today, and then of course into tomorrow.
Then I want to talk about something that we were talking about earlier. You bring a really unique perspective to the dental world, in that you were a Division I college athlete. And I think part of that is you grew up knowing that it takes a team. So I know culture is something that you talk about quite a lot. Will you talk to our audience about how to build an incredible culture?
Mm.
That's the second $1 million question.
It's a beautiful question. No, it's a beautiful question, because back to we are the company we keep. But, as leaders of our teams, we have an idea, we start a company, we start a practice, whatever we're doing. It always comes down to the choice we have in leadership. And I've become a student of leadership over the last kind of 15 plus years. And we have two options. You could be a command and control leader, like you're in the Army, and you're facing life and death, and you're commanded, and that's the hierarchy of that. That's also most of corporate America, even today. Or you can have what Steve Covey talks about, trust and inspire, where you inspire people and you build this deep trust with each other. And that, I believe, is the culture you want to build. I'm a big fan of servant leadership, and that is we serve our people. So if we can make our people the best they can be, the best versions of themselves, we in turn become the best we can be. So how do we do that? I think the first thing to do is to set out, of course, the people side of the equation, of getting aligned with people on their value system, that you bring the right people to the table. You identified why you do it, what you do, to sound like Simon Sinek a little bit, but you really got to figure out purpose. What are you doing? What's the organization's reason to be here? What am I doing here? And you really identified purpose. And then you set a vision for your people. So I think once you first have vision, purpose, values, and you got the right people at the table, everything is possible. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if we're going to have a car dealership, we're going to have a beautiful smile design company, we're going to have unique dental practices and healthcare systems. I think once you have that, everything is possible. Your culture of your company is driven by your people. Your quality of your conversation is driven by the people you choose to bring to that table. And the leadership is really critical to create that kind of conversations with your people where they feel inspired. They want to come to work. They love being there. Anybody who thinks differently, it's going to be challenging, because the people then say, well, what's next? You're going to have turnover. You're going to have unhappy people. You don't have people who say, I want to continue to learn. The most powerful cultures are people who are curious. They want to learn. They want to grow. And this way, you put your goals out there, and I'll go back to talking about Dan Sullivan a little bit, because this is the world that I think people like Dan Sullivan and even the structure of EOS that you mentioned from Traction and orthodontic Gito Wickman, they put structure in place, but the soft skills is the environment you're creating for people to thrive. And that culture is so critical. Some people can give it lip service, but you gotta live it.
For anybody who's been in your practice, and I think all three of us have been in your practice, you know when you walk into your practice that there is a different culture. You see the patients hugging you or their providers. You see the assistants smiling. You see the lab technicians working hard, having nice communication. There was definitely a vibe in your practice. And I remember Jonathan telling me it's like a ship that he has storage in every weird which way, just like Beverly Hills, New York City is an expensive place to have a lot of space. So, most of our practices are fairly small, but I mean, it was really like a well-oiled machine when I was there, I think in 2016. And I definitely felt the vibe in there. So you're practicing what you preach for sure.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And I'm on the mindset, I'm just beginning. Here I've been in this industry almost 4 decades now. And I always think of, I'm just getting started. And what I mean by that is I have so much to learn. I really do. And I have a very curious mind, and I want to always be better at what I do. And I try to bring people who share that mindset of constant learning, constant growth. And for me as a leader, I create the environment. It's very unique because for all these years that I've worked, I don't have any equity partners in my practice. Now, because I'm getting to be I'm going to get some gray hair soon, that I'm looking to change that. And I have a new project that I'm working on. But the only reason I've been able to pull that off within the industry is that I created an environment for people that they can really do well in. And I take care of all the business side, and my team takes care of the business side. And I say that because I have learned, and I didn't start out like this. I don't, anybody listening, I don't want to think I have all the answers. I do not. What I do have, though, is I'm a strong observer of what works and then what doesn't work. And I have enough humility to say, I made a mistake, or let's take corrective action. Let's grow from this. And I'm a big proponent on, Christian, you asked that question before about the people we bring in. 2 things I think about: humility and competence. And when I meet people who have those 2 beautiful qualities, that's it. That's the kind of person I want to be surrounded by, like you folks on this call. And because with humility, we'll always have an open mind to learn. We know where we came from, and it just becomes easier to grow and to build things with that mindset.
Jonathan, I want to double click on this topic of culture and people, because it's very clear on this call that it's all about your people and building a good culture. So I think these topics can feel pretty lofty to people that are just getting started. If you were to say what the number one thing is to implement a good culture, the number one habit on a daily basis, what would you suggest for our listeners?
Well, I got to start with, we say leadership is at every level. And for people to learn a lot of these new concepts, these kind of, we'll call them the soft skills, you have to work on yourself first. So we talked about personal growth and personal mastery. And if we talk about personal growth and personal mastery, and for us to be that leader, it's about us first. And when we go after that, it's the way to start your day. It's the optimism and the mindset. If we focus on negativity of the day before, and we wake up and we're thinking about negative things, you're going to have not such a great day. You have that couple of days in a row, and all of a sudden you find yourself in not a good place. So the truth of the matter is that we have to wake up with high energy, optimistic mindset, right? Now, how does that happen? So there's a concept of high performance habits. I'm sure you guys know Brandon Bouchard, Robin Sharma, 5 a.m. Club, John Roussat, who's an amazing CEO coach who comes on our foundation mission with us. So these inspiring business coaches have a lot to say. And so mindset, meditation, starting the day off right, journaling, fitness, workout, everybody knows the neuroplasticity that comes out of motion and how we challenge our bodies, and it helps us with motion for longevity and anti-aging. So it's kind of becoming a student of how to build an optimistic mindset and maintain it so that when we walk into our office or we walk into a meeting, we're not some negative person that's beating people up, because that just doesn't work. That's the command and control culture.
Now, I really want to take advantage of your time to touch on a point that I think it's probably became my preferred topic in dentistry, and the thing that I'm learning the most, that is the oral systemic link, and how limited dentistry is today and how much better we can get by understanding this link. And I know you are also passionate about this topic. You've been exploring this topic. You talk about this topic, and you just wrote a book about this topic. So tell us a little bit more about what brought you into this topic, and where do you see dentistry going, evolving into it?
Yeah. So it's always been curious to me why medicine and dentistry are separated. And when I started exploring it and diving into it and realizing it goes back hundreds of years, why medicine and dentistry in the United States is disconnected, without going into the story too much, but it was called the Grand Rebuke, where the medical school didn't let the dentists, the medical student, the docs who wanted to practice dentistry to be part of medicine. In Italy, we know, in Europe for years, you were an MD first and then became a DDS. Only Harvard, thank you, Ingrid, is the only dental school that has the dental school part of the medical school. And thanks God for Bruce Donoff, who was there for 27 years, who drove that thinking of medicine and dentistry connected. But unfortunately, it's very disconnected. We don't talk to each other. We don't share information. And I deeply believe, and from understanding the science behind the connection of the mouth and the body, I deeply believe that dentistry and the dental practice could be the tip of the spear of healthcare for diagnostics. And that's because they come to us more than they come to the doctor. And because of our new technology, we all know about CBCT and salivary diagnostics and airway and all the great new things that we have and the knowledge we have, we can really help get upstream more to a wellness model. So instead of just talking about it, because I do have a podcast about it, I do have a book coming out about it, and people like myself and all of us who are driving this thinking, I said, I'm going to go do something about it. So my new project, which I'm really excited about, because we got to do, right, Christian?
Yep.
And Ingrid. And with my two sons, who started an oral care brand called Twice, that they're doing very nicely with. They're going to free themselves up. Hopefully, they're going to get done with the transaction, and they're going to join me on this new experience that Ingrid knows this name called Smile House, because I kind of talked to her about it all the way back in 2018. And we're creating a very interesting integrated healthcare model, leading with dentistry, but also connecting the dots deeply into overall health. And we're figuring out how to do that, because we don't have the answers, but we're going to share the ideas. I talked to Steve Thorne from Pacific. I work closely with Henry Schein of Dispatches of the Future, and we're going to do it. And we're going to look to figure it out, where through salivary diagnostics, through a connection maybe of having nurse practitioners, I can go on and on with interesting software, putting great AI software like Pearl and companies like this underneath that umbrella. We believe that we can get to disease early and drive more of this wellness model that's happening in anti-aging, longevity, and regenerative medicine science. So that's my new exciting project that I'm doing, Christian.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited about it, because I believe that it's all these things we do in the past gets us ready for today. And when you have, a lot of energy and want to keep going, and plenty of guys my age are heading for the golf courses, but I'm not taking up golf, and I'm not going after that world. I like to go do new things and surround myself with young people like yourselves and have some fun. And so, we're going after it. But I really believe that it's going to happen. And it's going to happen using this new technology and just going after it and really figuring out how we can do that, how we can break down those walls and connect these dots. I also have to mention my podcast host, Maria Filipova, who's an absolute rock star in healthcare, and she was at Anthem Health, and then she went into CareQuest, and now she's doing a number of things. But one of the things she does is the podcast for this. But Think Oral Health. She's a classic person who realizes how these dots need to connect, and the patients are going to win out on this. And it's oral health and dentistry is one of the missing links in healthcare that is not connected and not focused on. Mental health is the other area. I think that's becoming very obvious that needs a focus. So I think it's a golden age in dentistry. I think because of technology, because a lot of these new business models and new companies, that the relevance of what we do in dentistry, the elevation of the connection of the mouth and body is right there today. Yeah.
I actually think that what you're doing, connecting oral health to systemic health, will help the mental health of the practitioners as well.
What?
Because I think that when the dentist gets more respect instead of just being looked at, like Christian talks about being the same as the barber in the back room, pulling teeth, when we really get looked at as real doctors and not, oh, you're just a dentist, that changes how people feel about how the work that they do. And they feel like, I'm really helping this person. I'm not just, waiting for a problem to come and then fixing it. They can really be preventative. I think a lot of us would like to be preventative. I think of course, we have financially driven diagnosis, which doesn't help with our respect, but does help with us making money. So I think that is probably the only challenge that we will have with this oral systemic health link is, can you get paid for making people healthy instead of can you get paid for fixing a problem?
Yeah. Kyle, I couldn't agree with you more. And I believe one of my missions for me is the elevation of the profession. In the book that I wrote, the first couple of paragraphs, I talk about the scene out of Hangover where he looks over and he says, "You're only a dentist," as he's asking me, what's in the patient file? If you remember the beginning of remember Hangover. But that's exactly right. And by connecting the dots, it's we all know in the profession of dentistry, we all know the learning process and the educational process and every hat we have to wear, and medicine's the same. It's the same, dentistry, where I like to say we're oral physicians, right? We're part of the same healthcare system. It's one overall system. It's a $4 trillion business in the United States, 20% of GDP. So if they created a wellness approach and we got upstream and we can get the diagnostics early before they form systemic inflammatory disease like cardiovascular diabetes, Alzheimer's, all of them, we're going to save huge amounts of dollars. Functional medicine people are talking about this. We are hearing them, the Mark Hymans of the world. Amazing. They're moving the needle. And all of this wellness thinking just has to become more mainstream. So we do have to start somewhere for dentistry.
And dentistry can literally lead the process, be at the forefront. Because we see people so much, and so many things are represented in the mouth. And the patients are already used to, opening their mouth and allowing us to observe and collect all this data. So it's really in our hands to move from reactive dentistry into proactive dentistry. And
that's exactly right.
And changing, I believe that the biggest number one change is changing the approach of a first appointment. The first appointment in dentistry needs to be reinvented.
I love that.
Yeah, you're the master of that, Christian.
I love that. Just to share a very quick story is on our foundation mission. What we learned, because we brought nurse practitioners in with dental specialists, and we're all under one roof. And what we learned, that when we work together, and this is a population that is obese, hypertensive, pre-diabetic or diabetic, lost teeth, absolutely oral health disaster, both decay, periodontal disease, inflammation, abscesses. When we work together, we could get the patients healthy. And we went into the schools to educate the young people. And we saw these young people over the last 8 years not having that kind of dental disease. And writing papers on this and putting the data together. I got Harvard, BU, and NYU Public Health working with us. And so it's very exciting. And that really helped also shape my thinking that we got to go do something about this, because I saw it at Microcosm of Eleuthera in the Bahamas, where we have our foundation. I saw that firsthand with the team. And, all my people would be talking about it, both on the dental and medical side. So,
yeah, we know it's coming. Like you said, Pacific and other large DSOs have already started implementing this.
That's right.
Walmart was trying it; they failed, but others are trying. And I think if we, the dentists, can be on that forefront, and instead of having it come from big private equity and coming from money, and we can do it out of coming from ethics and coming from treating patients the right way, then we really control the narrative on that, and we can really help patients.
Yeah, I fully agree. Technology is also going to help us bridge a gap. We don't have a universal health record in medicine. We surely don't have a record where medicine and dentistry talk. But what is happening, which happened in Forward Medical, is for the patient to own their records. So one of the areas that we are looking at is building that kind of software so the patient has a platform and has all their data there. And that's
we now have dental offices that are using Epic too, that is used in the healthcare system. So that crossover has been happening for a few years.
Yeah.
And I think the more we can make that crossover to where it's all one chart, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Everybody benefits.
It's crazy that we don't have that yet, that there's not a place that you can go to collect all the exams and reports that you've been doing since 20 years. One place for everything, that you can just drop everything there. And every time you go to a new doctor or dentist, you can just copy paste that and say, look at my info, right?
Yeah.
And people want it. People are obsessed with their health data. They're looking at their Whoop. They're looking at their Apple Watch. Like, they're craving it, and we're just not giving it to them. It's such an opportunity.
That's exactly right. I mean, can you imagine the patient is either pre-diabetic or diabetic who hasn't gone to a dentist for 2 years, who has inflamed gingiva and has comorbidity issues, and nobody's talking to each other between medicine and dentistry. So it couldn't go on and on and on. Well, we're going to figure it out. We'll do it all together and, push the envelope a little.
We
have to have you back on.
Yeah, we need an episode just about that, because that is the best topic of the moment, and there's so much to learn with it. We need to create awareness and influence people in that direction. So we need to.
Absolutely.
So Jonathan, as we're bringing this to landing, where can people find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me, Instagram, let's say Dr. John Levine, Jon Levine, Levine. Jonathan at jblnyc.com. We have our website, jblnyc.com. We have a website, glowgoodfoundation.org. And Dr. Jonathan Levine, also.com. I have my own website. So lots of different ways, different websites. I know Ingrid was asked me those questions already, and I think you put them somewhere.
Or Fifth Avenue number.
923 Fifth Avenue is the practice.
Yeah, very convenient. I was hanging out at the park, and I think my wife and I were on our baby moon or something, and I said, "You just hang at the park. I'm going to walk across and meet one of my friends."
That was great. Next time you're in the city, you better come over and say hello, or
I'll make it happen.
Give me a warning, and we'll get together.
It's such a beautiful practice.
Yeah.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so excited for episode 2, and we will see you probably in the next couple of months.
Look forward to it. It was great chatting it up with y'all.
Fantastic.
Great to see you.
Thanks.
See you.
Yeah.